What's up guys, Houndish here. Today, we're jumping in with another Destiny 2 video. In this one, we have a couple of updates from Bungie. Of course, we're going into 2026. And when Bungie return, we'll get a couple of the first updates for the game, as well as new information. So we'll touch on that. We'll speak briefly about the return of Crota's End, but in Destiny Rising, which has been pretty interesting. And otherwise, new details about content that'll be coming up in 2026, returning maps from D1, new systems, and a general discussion about where the game goes in 2026. So a few interesting things to talk about. If you enjoyed the video, hit subscribe, drop us a rating or a comment down below, as it would really help us out. But otherwise, let's get into it. Tracking some of the first updates that we'll get this week, Twid returns on Thursday, so I'll keep you posted with it. Otherwise, D2 team said, after thorough investigation, we've identified the cause of an issue where lobby balancing has been re-enabled in Trials of Osiris. This has been added to the known issues list, and a fix is being planned for January, so that should be turned off again this month. I don't know how many times lobby balancing has mistakenly been re-enabled, but it certainly winds up people who play a lot of Trials, so that's one thing that'll be fixed. Otherwise, there should also be a fix for Armamentarium, which isn't reducing heat on heat weapons, as it now has an auto-loading function which isn't working entirely as it should. But outside of those, there are other issues. Players reporting that they're not earning weekly shipments from Tharsis factions. I've seen a few questions about it, Bungie have acknowledged it, so hopefully a fix soon. Other weird issues where vendor rank up packages from Lawless Frontier are being gated by Witch Queen ownership, and problems where exotic contracts aren't completing when doing invasions. So given that Bungie have been away during the kind of back end of the launch period for Renegades, I'm sure there'll be a handful of fixes for new content when we start getting patches in the new year. And hopefully, Bungie will give us an idea when we're going to get Iron Banner again. I know a lot of folks want to pick up the new weapon, as well as the armor set from last season, as they may have missed it. Otherwise, Bungie have said we should be seeing a bunch of heavy surges added to the portal to increase time with rockets and machine guns. Then we get Arms Week in January, which we've mentioned. And otherwise, it's Guardian Games in March. So with February being quiet, I'm kind of hoping that's when we'll see the first Iron Banner, but we'll have to wait for confirmation from Bungie. Other potentially interesting things about content in the near future, but Colony Deeks shared, Bastion appears to be returning to Destiny 2. You remember that super large map on Mars in D1? Apparently it's been added to the game files again recently. Maybe it's been reserved for something like Heavy Metal, which we know is coming back in the season. Otherwise, for the next major update, Shadow and Order, we will once again see a launch event, which for the last major update, Ash and Iron, was called New Territories. It basically buffs the drop rate of the event-specific loot in the first week of the event. But this time around, it shows a banner with the old tower on it. This is some D1 concept art, so I'm curious to see if there's any narrative there or whether it's just an image. Other things we'll see in the near future, maybe in the major update or perhaps before, but a bunch of ciphers have been added to the game, like the Fireteam, Crucible, and Iron Cipher, as well as an update to our old Nightfall ciphers, which if you have them in your inventory, you can see are now called Pinnacle Ops ciphers. And Shin on Destiny the Game Reddit expanded on this and said ciphers will be the means by which we can purchase old portal gear at tower vendors, which I assume is info that's actually from the database. Obviously, Fireteam Ops ciphers will reward stuff from Fireteam Solo and Arena Ops. Pinnacle Ops, Crucible, Osirian, and Iron ciphers are kind of obvious as to what they'll reward. And obviously Bungie want to put these in place as items that will work season over season as Bungie actually update the loot pools. On top of that, the maximum stack size for the ciphers has been increased to 50, which is far higher than what they were previously for Nightfall ciphers. So it is obviously an update that Bungie have coming. DMG had also indicated that whether it's TechSec, Bushido, or weapons like Mint Retrograde, we will be able to earn them again. So we'll see when this update drops. I would imagine by the time we get to Shadow and Order, they'll have been implemented. Unless, of course, Bungie managed to do it before then, which would be nice. So let us know in the comment section if there are any of the older Edge of Fate era items that you are still hoping to pick up. Otherwise, for the moment, you just have to hope for good RNG from Hawthorne. A quick mention here that's interesting, but Destiny Rising just launched the Crota's End raid, so much like we've seen with the old D1 raids, this is like the third or fourth iteration of this raid across different updates, and now in a different game entirely. As we can see from the gameplay, this was shared by Sneaky Beaver. I haven't personally played it, but it's cool to see it in a different context. And this time to down Crota, you actually have to attack Crota's sword with weapons, as we can see here, and then other team members can damage with weapons. And there's a final stand phase where you actually go into Crota's throne world through the portal, and players can chase him in there. So that's kind of a cool update, to be fair, to that raid. I kind of wish Bungie had done something a bit more like that when they updated it for D2. If you happen to have played it though, give me any thoughts you have on it down below. Our last bit of discussion for today, though, is about Destiny 2 in 2026. Of course, this conversation's been had by a few folks. Paul Tassi posted an article with some good questions. You'll see immediately the image shows Old Chicago, or concept art for it, posted by Bungie many years ago, and there's anticipation that for the Shattered Cycle DLC, which is supposed to come out in summer 2026, that this could be one of the key destinations, especially given the Chicago references in Edge of Fate and Lodi teasing a bunch of stuff about it. Old Chicago is the popular assumption for a new destination in the next year. But back to the core game, there's a good question here. What will happen to the portal? And it's pointed out this is the most widely disliked addition after the final shape, which I think is certainly true. Bungie have made small improvements for it, but I think it will be a big job to completely overhaul it, rework it, remove it. Whatever Bungie do with the portal, I feel like it has to be significant, and that will be one of their big challenges for this year. Other things, though, include gear tiering. And on top of that, there are additional elements like the featured gear thing, which is like partially irrelevant at this point, power resets and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of components that Bungie have baked into the game that players aren't especially keen on. We do like tier 5 loot in itself, but it raises a bigger question about loot quality. As at the moment, tier 5s are just raining. They're actually better, on the most part, than adept weapons we had in the past. So when you think about it, Bungie have kind of obliterated high tier weapon chase in some respects, as it's just become the complete norm, and it's also going to feel bad when they take that away from us. So it raises a big question about how do Bungie make general legendary loot in the game interesting moving forward, and what actually happens to that tiering system. There's also a conversation about mid-season updates. Of course, when we get to Shadow and Order, we seriously hope that it's something better than Ash and Iron. I think realistically, we can't expect to get a lot more content, but there's definitely a hope that what we do get will at least be higher in quality, less buggy, and maybe less disjointed in terms of narrative. And what we've seen about the potential Shadow and Order update being focused on the Dredgens, maybe with a new activity focused on a Hive weapons foundry. On paper, it sounds cool, but of course, delivering something that does that concept justice is a separate challenge. Another one of the conversations is about the player base and general player numbers for the game. And throughout 2025 especially, we saw a significant decline in that number, which Bungie won't like to see, obviously, although they would have anticipated some continued player drop-off through this year, with them moving into a different model. And of course, they have a reduced workforce for Destiny, so they're not spending the same resources on the game. But it still raises a question of how long does Destiny 2 have left, how long and how much further will we see player numbers actually decline, and at what point does that become a really big issue in terms of Bungie being able to support the game? Which is why they've promised this roadmap that we're going to get this year. I do still believe that Bungie can bring players back to Destiny 2, but the level of work required to really engage people again is without a doubt very significant. If Bungie could drop an expansion that was the size of Witch Queen, for instance, then they might have a chance to really kind of switch things up, but the sense of scale and quality would have to be there. You'd need an offering as good as Renegades, but larger, and with additions like subclasses, way more exotic loot to chase, and generally an endgame that makes more sense across the board. So how that plays out isn't entirely clear, but I do think that we'll get all of the content that Bungie have promised through 2026. However, what happens beyond that, I think will probably be clear by the end of 2026, because if Bungie don't change the current player count trend, not that I'm trying to be negative, but it's just a simple fact that that's going to have a big impact on where we go from here. So it will be an interesting year once again. However, it's not over yet, and I'm hoping Bungie can drop us some pretty cool content in 2026, but on that front, I will keep you posted. For today, that is what we have to discuss. So if you've enjoyed the video, found it interesting, stimulating, not too stimulating, hopefully, then give us your thoughts in the comment section. For now though, I appreciate you watching. I'll keep you up to date with all of Bungie's news, and I hope you have an awesome day.